Dean Driggers. I'm the Dean of the Kansas City campus. And I want to welcome you to this event. You look beautiful. I'm so excited about this audience. Give yourself a round of applause. Can we also give Professor Bass a round of applause for this wonderful event? I'm excited about it. I'm not going to stay on this microphone long at all. I just want to invite my colleague, Elliot Nevins, to come to the microphone. He's going to do a number for us to celebrate Black History Month. He's going to sing Lift Every Voice and sing, and then we will move forward with the program. Thank you for coming.
That's what it sounded like.
No, you'll be fine.
This is very, very last minute, so I'm gonna try my best.
It's like riding a bike.
Breathe, just breathe.
Let me just, give me like 1 minute to. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the glistening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
All right. Piece of cake, piece of cake.
Thank you, Elliot. That was beautiful. So, welcome everyone. Once again, I'm Mike Billingsley and run the music program here at the college. I was telling Amy, who works in our area, she said, you know, if it's more than 4 people here, I think it'll be fine. I'm like, hey, 4 and less, it gets a little weird. Like, should I just sit with you guys? Maybe we should just talk about this. So this is a great setting, a great turnout. All of you young people in here, no offense to the less young, but you know, you're who we see in our classes. So it's beautiful for me to see you because I don't think I had the opportunity to have any of you in class. So I love when these turn into more authentic, more sincere opportunities for me to talk about things we do in our music classroom. So thank you for coming out. I'll also second thank you, Liz Bass, not just for inviting me to be here, but also for being a champion of this campus for the past 20 years since I've been here, and I'm certain before that. So let's just give Liz 1 minute. Yeah, this campus I know has always, as you know, if there's been one single champion during my time, you know, Liz was there. And then of course I'm also looking at Leslie Fredericks, who, you know, is ready to take that and run with it.
Yes.
And I want to thank also Dave Downham and Amy Ty, who are from our music and audio programs, and they just helped me get all set up today with everything. So thank you guys. All right, well, let's get started. So we're in a mental health. We're talking about healing, and I decided that one of the lectures I'd like to talk about is blues, and blues is healing. I think Elliot's performance will help me, and I'll reference it a little bit. You know, when we see how physical that was for Elliot, also mental, because Liz just asked him to do it, and he had to sort of prepare himself, so it was a whole other thing. But while he's performing, all that great dopamine is being released, and then he's physically sort of like getting the blood moving and the heart beating. And so these are the kind of things we'll talk about. I'll just little here and there tell you some research studies that support the kind of healing we're getting into, and then maybe some different ways that you haven't thought about music, and specifically this genre of the blues. So before we get started, what are the blues? You know, what is this? And let me move my slides along here. What are we talking about, or what do you think we're talking about when we say the blues? And since we don't have a mic out in the audience, you can just yell it out. Like, what are we talking? What do you know the blues to be?
Music.
Yeah, it's a type of music, right? What sets it apart? So we go, all right, the blues is this. We put walls around it because what does it do? What is it like?
Feel good.
It's a feel-good music. So we're drilling down, right? We're getting there. We got lots of feel-good musics. What is the blues? You know, what's a nuance or a detail maybe that separates it from other feel-good music? It's that? A common music, right? And that prefix "com," like that idea of COMM, common, community, right? That's going to be a big part of what we talk about today, right? That's a really like a with each other kind of music, a music that's not meant to be performed alone, right? That's a key idea, and it's a music of a people, right? It's now become a music that we can all have some ownership of or find some ownership of, but it's a music that grew out of people, it grew out of experience, right? So what else? How about the sound of the blues? Do we have any of that? Any thoughts about that? Like when you think about it, what does it sound like compared to pop? A little bit smoothie, a little bit smoother, a little bit more jazzy, right? And so we want to get into what that is. All right, what is it that made that? We teach a jazz history class here. I haven't done it in a while, but when I would do it, I'd always say, and I'm really a jazz musician by training, but when people say, oh, that's America's music, jazz music, it's America's music, I always feel the need to correct them and say, no, blues. Blues is the most American music I'm aware of. There's not a single genre that's happening today on the radio that doesn't have some strand of it that isn't a blues strand. And I can't think of any other genre across the world, classical music very much included, that has that component, where there's always something about this blues thing that we're talking about. I'm gonna be talking a lot today about action, agency, you know, sort of putting oneself into a musical situation or a cultural or a common, a communal situation. And I'm gonna say this about the blues. I usually say blues music is an exercise in exercising. And exercising the latter here, I'm talking about freeing oneself of a negativity, you know, of a demon, if you will. This idea that if you name your problem, you own your problem, right? Now it's something you're in control of, right? And so at the end, I'm going to ask us to maybe think about one of those problems, and maybe if you're feeling so confident, to come up here on the mic and share it in the form of a blues stanza, which I'll talk about. You're certainly not required to do that. But this is what we're talking about. It's an exercise, right? So the first thing is it's a doing, right? And in terms of exercising things that you want to exercise, that you want to own, you want to take hold of. Something that I may or may not get into, but just as an introduction, today's hip hop artists are obviously like our most current blues musicians, right? They're our most current blues poets. Before them, we would maybe look a little bit more to like some other R&B, and then jazz musicians that came before it, swing era musicians that came before it. And obviously all of these genres continue to go on and on and on. All right, so let's talk then about musical and cultural roots of this music. In order to understand blues music, we need to better understand African music, right? This is music that came, whether it wanted to or not, via the slave trade, right? And as those sounds and those traditions came here, all of a sudden these beautiful things that meant something very different in, say, West Africa, now had to find their ways to sort of bounce off of whatever frames were trying to hold them down, right? And so it was becoming a new natural process. But this is the one that I usually talk about that I feel like most people don't realize about a beautiful thing about African culture, tribal culture, that's different from the Western point of view. By Western, I'm saying all these traditions that came from Europe and have now sort of proliferated here in the United States. On this side, we have the European product of music making. It's this idea of what we're doing right now on some level. I'm here, you're here, right? I have the mic, you're to be quiet, you're to be silent, right? So this is the European model. This is the African model. The African model sees us all as one equal group with all the potential to speak and to add. There is no, and in truth, this whole idea, this is more the African model of making music. In African music, there is no audience. There is no one who's not part of a performance. If you're there, you're part of the performance. Maybe you clap, maybe you stomp, maybe you find a little melody that you like to sing. Maybe you just offer your own form of verbal support. Yep, yeah, amen, right? These kind of interjections are all part of the African model. So when we look at European, we're saying we have people on a stage, they've rehearsed music that's been meticulously composed, learned an instrument, learned to play it the right way, and they play it for an audience who is there to be a passive part of that. It's not to say that this isn't enjoyable. We all do this. We love it. I'm going to go to many more concerts after this. You are too. We're going to have a great time. But what we're saying here is this is a different kind of doing. And that's what we're talking about today, doing. I'm glad you used the word common, right? Because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about something that requires a degree to get into. We're talking about just being a human and wanting to be human with other people. This is a way to do it and a way to exercise those kind of feelings that we want to take ownership of. In the African side, we look at groups, tribes. The most important thing you need to understand about African music was it was a socializing component. That's all that it was. It was just a means to get the tribe to be stronger, right? So the more that you could pull people into the participatory part, the better the music was, right? So good music on this side is maybe music that soars into the highest ranges, that demonstrates the greatest techniques on a violin or a trumpet or what have you. No concern really on this side of things, right? On this one, the more people that are more fully engaged, that's good music, right? So from an African side, all of us being engaged, that's the value. So the participatory communal part of this is really, really key. We'll talk about one more. In both cases, we're talking about resolving attention, right? So let me see if I can make this all work. So in the case of Western music and European music, we basically have complex harmonies. And the idea is, among other things, to take a bunch of chords and harmonically move them to a place of tension and then find a way to resolve those. And in truth, this is something that the composer Beethoven and Bach and the Beatles are really remarkable at doing. And so let me just try and make this work. So like you guys all hear that? Yeah. So I put a couple of Roman numerals up here because get myself situated. So like what you're looking at here, this is something like in a theory class we might look at. So we still use Roman numerals for whatever reason we do. But so that doesn't mean 1V7, so it means 1, 5, 7, 1, 4, lowercase 4, which is a minor chord, and I'll talk about that in a second, 1. And a chord progression like that sounds like this. Do you all feel like that ended? Yeah, right? You get some sense that when I go, we get a sense that that's over. African music is about resolving tension too, but it's a rhythmic thing. I would say like wherever the Europeans put all of their talents into sort of figuring out a piano. Like if you ever looked inside a piano, it's an incredible invention. So many centuries to figure out how to build this thing. All of those energies were about greater complexity and harmony. Africans were spending their time figuring out how to find a balance amongst the tension in a lived sense. So there's no product, there's no end. The ends of an African performance are the means. The entire performance itself is the goal. As long as it's going and as long as we're doing it, that's the goal. It isn't waiting to go, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. Now it's enjoyable, right? It's just living. It's as long as the thing is sort of afloat. But part of that gets to be really complicated rhythmic practices. So it's kind of nice to see someone coming in with a young child on her hip, because as we would have had if we were all growing up in Africa, we all would have grown up probably in a sling around our mother's waist while she was doing work. And as she moved to these complex rhythms, they became a part of us. And so we would all feel it in a different way. It's just like whatever your parents listen to, that's a huge part of what you listen to now, whether you know it or not. And those of us who are older know that you start to have these realizations like, oh, that's from, mom listening to this or dad listening to that. So for Africans, part of this rhythmic music making was a part of their natural order in life. So they're feeling these as their mother's work and are moving. And these rhythms I'm talking about are called polyrhythms. And the idea of a polyrhythm is basically like, in one case we have like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But it's the idea is if I had one side of the room going 1, 2, 1, 2, and this side of the room going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and trying to find the balance between something that's split in 3 and something that's split in 2. I'm not going to ask you to do that today, but I did just write down this is from a West African tribe, and believe it or not, it actually goes about 5 or 6 strands deeper, but I thought it would be something we could do to try and find some of the balance within this tension. All right, so the first question really is, can you all see these 2 numerical lines on the bottom? Yes. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna give you guys the easier side. All right, so you're gonna take this first line, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna clap wherever we see a number that's underlined. Right? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Dun, 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 dun. All right, join me on this side. 1, 2, ready, and boom, boom, bum, 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 bum. All right, dig in. Go ahead. Come on, give it to me. More. Boom, 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 boom. Keep going. And while you do it, I want you to just sort of get the sense of the beat, like get your body to keep time. I'm gonna have you guys just join them for a second, just so you can feel this one. Same thing. Bum, bum, bum. Good. Keep going. I'm going to talk while you do it. So right now, we are all part of the same tribe, right? We're all part of the same group. We're just doing this to feel together. We're all the same, right? This is us. Okay, you can stop for a second, though. Keep it in your head because you're going to do it again. The idea would be that kind of strain, that might be something we give to the kids. Every kid gets a shaker. Every kid gets a block of wood. Every kid gets some kind of drum membrane, a gourd, or whatever it might be. And they're just boom, 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 dun, 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 dun. The entire time, we know there's plenty of more rhythms that can be fit in there, can sort of fit in. So as we look at other things we can do with other instruments as well, this is where all of a sudden the tension starts coming in, right? As you can all know, like everyone wasn't giving it their all right away, and so that doesn't help. But once we get in, you can even still feel like you have to move. This can't be an intellectual exercise. You have to feel that strong beat. Right, that has to keep going. So what happens then if I put another line, and I want you to just look at the line, and I have a lot of very smart people in the room. What's gonna happen then as I add this other line? Talk to me about the ramifications of adding a 12-beat line to this.
Discord.
Yeah, first, one of the things will be discord, right? And the discord's going to come in places where right away we're together. Boom. Easy. But then while this group claps, this group waits, and then you fill in their blank, right? And then boom, we're together. But anyone who's played music knows 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is like a weak beat, right? So all of a sudden we're going to come together on a weak beat, and then we're all going to wait, and then we're going to come back in another weak beat. You guys are going to go. You guys are going to clap. Then where the real sort of chemistry comes in is now this group's still got 4 more beats to go, while you guys are going to start over. So the second time through, it's going to sound entirely different. All those places where we might have been before, we will not be this time, right? So the independence of that is great, but now we have to find a way to sort of do that as a community, feel that. And what I'm getting at is that as the tribe grows and grows and advances, we add and we add and we add, right? And more gets added to this, to the point of where it sounds like cacophony from those people who don't know what's going on. And if you've read any US history, you know that Africans turned African Americans, music making in the early 1800s, the white settlers, the white slave masters just thought it was noise, right? They had no idea how complex what they were listening to because they didn't have that experience. They didn't understand the idea that all of this wasn't noise, that it was actually incredibly impressive. All right, so let's get us, we'll get everyone clapping and then we'll put the two together. Let's try this one over here and it'll be easier for me to grab this back. All right, so in this one, we're just gonna add 4 more beats and then the cycle will continue. So we're looking at it as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Go ahead. Keep top. Listen as you do it. All right, good. So you hear it, but yet you also hear how this may not go right. Right? So immediately, like that sense, it's like, how invested in the tribe are you? Right? So I'm in. I'm all in. Right? But you know, how much are we in there? How deep do we really want to dig down and express that thing? And again, we're talking about healing. And part of what I'm saying is even a simple exercise like this has been shown in study after study after study. When you do this, you are releasing dopamine, right? You are making yourself happy, right? That's the part. It's like there's the puzzling sort of mental capacity, but then also the physical just activity of doing it. All right, so let's get our first clap going again. And that one went like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep that going. Bum, bum. Keep that going. I'm going to say this while you do it. If you feel good on that, stay on that. Good. If you feel like you want a challenge, you're going to join me on the one on the bottom. Now, here's the key. This one has to stay strong. Because what we're about to do is going to clash, right? And we're going to have to find that balance amongst the tension. All right, so if you feel good, we're going to try the second one while this goes. 1, 2, 3, 1. So stop for a sec. Believe it or not, there's so much echo in this room. But besides that, you're doing it. Like you're doing like that first group and the second group who joined me. I can hear it, right? I'm hearing it. Like you hear it in there. And as we would go and as we grow, right, we just get more and more confident with this being our tribe, this being what we do, this being an activity that we have together. And again, we add and we add and we add and we add. And then as the complexity grows, the idea is we just grow deeper together, right? Our traditions grow. Remember too, when we're talking about African traditions, these are oral and oral traditions. What does that mean? Oral and oral traditions. What are these? You just yell it out. Yeah, we're talking about things that are passed down by me saying it or me doing it, and then you doing it back, right? And so wise elders, whatever the subject may be, but certainly in the case of music and the griot, is this idea that I pass down to you, these musical ideas, and then we do them together. But there is no sense of it existing on paper, right? It's not a written tradition. Okay, let's slide on. So when I teach my music classes, I always say there's really 5 components you would look at in all music. Let me just check my time to make sure I'm good. Okay. These are the 5 components. The first 3 are what music is, right? Pretty much any musical situation you can think of has a melodic sense to it, a harmonic sense to it, and a rhythmic sense. Those are 3 things that just exist. Nothing more important than rhythm. Rhythm's the only one that's an absolute necessity. Because we could all just sit here right now very quietly in our heads and have our own silent symphony of sorts, right? We could just sit here and just sort of feel the time. And to me, time is just always very musical, right? But as we start adding sounds, then the melody component becomes available. And then as we start adding sounds on top of sounds, now we have the harmonic component there as well. And the last 2 are talking about how we think about music. Texture looks at the ways in which music sits on top of each other and kind of the roles people play. In the last performance, we were all one timbre. Like timbre's a name of a sound. We were all hand claps, bop, 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 bop. But one was kind of a more foundational, a simpler 8-beat rhythm, and then the other side was a little bit more complex, secondary rhythm, just meant to sort of spice things up a little bit. And so it's looking at how these parts sit on top of each other and how they interact. And then finally, structure looks at how a performance exists over time. In our music, it's like if you think of like a rap song, it's got a verse, it's got a hook, it's got a verse, it's got a hook, right? It's got a verse, it's got a hook. A pop song might have a verse and a hook or a chorus, and then a verse and a hook, and then a bridge, right? So there are all these different parts. We're gonna be looking at how blues does each of these different things. Let's start with melody, and I'm gonna get my trumpet to do this. I always love this when we talk about this component about music. Studies have shown that when melodies tend to rise, we get a sense of like we're waiting, and we, believe it or not, become like a little stressed in the moment, right? Because you think about it, it's like, did you clean your room? Did you do it? Is that what? Like as I go up, it's like everything's like. But and I always joke with classes, I'm like, if I said everything to you like, welcome to class today. It's really good to see you all. But yet when we do that, when melodies fall, we get a sense of relaxation. We tend to sort of fall with them. So let's do this as an exercise. I really want you to dig into your really strong inner beings here. I want us to just stretch together for 1 second. So we're gonna stretch. We're just gonna go like, ready? Again. It's like you feel the tightness, right? All right, let's go the other way, and let's just let it all out and fall down. Ready? Take a breath through again. So these sighs, right? These cries in music, if we think, right? If I think of from like a European perspective, everything had sort of a certain way to play. Right? And so I may play a note like really sort of clean tone that way. Early jazz musicians, early blues musicians were trying to emulate vocal techniques. If you know, like Louis Armstrong, he's trying to play this like he sings, right? So if he goes, oh, he's trying to go, right? He's trying to get that fall off of the note. That's fun to do, right? It's just fun to play that way. Right? This idea of sort of letting out, sigh, sigh, sigh. It doesn't mean we don't rip up every now and then, but the idea of melody sort of falling that way, that's a big part of it. Major and minor. This is a key I'm going to talk about a little bit. Where are we with these two words? Does anyone know what the word major implies in music? Like when we talk about a major scale or a major chord? What's that? Yeah, so that's where the root of the words come from, right? Like a bigger and a smaller. How about from a sound perspective, though? So like, because major is the one. Everything comes from that because it's big. What does a major chord sound like versus a minor chord? What's that? So there's a higher component. So the question is, where does that come from? So here's the difference. So I'm going to play you a major chord. And now I'm going to turn it into a minor chord. All I'm doing there is I'm taking the third note, or the second note in this particular case, and I'm just lowering it, right? I'm doing that same thing. I'm just going to shade it. And this is where the blues really comes in. I usually talk about, like, I'll do an example. Like, if you think about one of the most major songs is Mary Had a Little Lamb. Right. If I take that whole thing and I blues the third note, right, and by that it means taking major and turning it to minor, it turns into like a hilarious version for Mary. Check this out. You get the idea. So, the idea is what we're trying to do is when we blues something, we tend to lower those notes. And I'll show you when we get to chords in a second. So we're lowering notes, we're talking about wails, we're talking about cries. And that's another huge thing that comes from African music. There were no crying in European music, right? There was technique. But this idea that someone might cry something out, and now it's in all American music, right? It's everywhere. So these are the melodies we're grasping onto. Harmony. Harmony was typically very simple, followed like a very simple formula, which I'm going to get to in a second. And let me. All right, you guys can all see this all the way in the back. So you're just looking at a piano keyboard here, and basically what you had before the blues is you would have, like, someone might play what's called like a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord. I feel the need to explain them. There will be no test afterwards. I'm just going to say this because I think you'll get it. So, like, you can see the C's are marked, and that's kind of how, when we look at the piano, we mark it by the system of C's, so the white keys and the black keys. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 white keys, and then we start over again, right? The pattern just keeps going up the next octave. The 1 chord would be the very first one. And all we do is we take every other note of the scale to get that chord. Right? And then the next chord is going to be the 4 chord. So I'm going to, right, so there's my 4th note, and I'm just going to make a chord out of that. And then my 5 chord, and then back to 1. Right? And so we would use these chords a lot. And African Americans in the middle of the 1800s would have heard these a lot in church as part of Baptist hymnals, these kind of simple triads. But what they started adding to it were some of these notes we're talking about, these blues notes. Our human voice can sing so many more pitches than a piano can sing. Right? A piano has been tuned to only be able to do really 12 in a set. But I'm going right from one key to the very next key. But the truth is, my voice can slide to many, many other pitches in between those 2 notes that the piano just can't play, because it either plays it or it doesn't. So part of the blues thing in the wailing and the crying and the sort of performing melodies like that is you get all of these other pitches that maybe for some would sound like discord, but for others was just this emotional doing activity. So what they would do is, like, they'd play the simple triad, and then they just add 1 blues note out of the scale at the top. Right? And so that added this color. Here's the next chord, and a blues note. Next chord, and a blues note. Right? So all told, this very kind of plain Baptist hymnal type music became. Right? Can you hear the difference? Can you hear just that sort of slight coloration, right? And that's a word we have in music called chromatic. Chromatic means colorful. And our chromatic notes just mean notes that are not in the key. Any note that's not in the key of C, are just the black keys, right? So just playing, right? Just getting those notes in there. Now remember, this was an oral and an oral culture, so music theory didn't matter, right? It was just trusting your ear, right? What were you hearing? And they were hearing mostly vocal music and trying to emulate that on their instruments, on guitars, on their trumpets, right? And whatever it might be, even on the piano to some degree, trying to find ways to make that happen. All right, so this is the harmony aspect, right? Just simple chords that have just a little bit of a blues tone to them. Okay, rhythm we talked about. We're talking about finding the balance amongst the tension. With texture, this is really key. Remember, we're a community, right? So the idea is, texturally, there's going to be a lot of give and take. There's going to be leaders, but there's always going to be responders, right? We want to think about this in almost like the old church, like preacher congregation style of music. When I was I usually make the joke to my students when I was in high school, I feel like I somehow had the same history teacher more than once, which I'm certain wasn't supposed to happen. And I feel like it was the same class twice, and I know that wasn't supposed to happen because I passed the first time. And every year, though, he would play the movie Glory. And for that, I was always really thankful because I really remember feeling like very connected to that. And one scene in particular was the first time I really understood what testifying meant. And there's a scene where this 54th Regiment of Massachusetts, they're about to head into battle. And they're sitting around a fireplace. So if you know it, you know the scene. And they're singing, "Oh my Lord, 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 Lord. Oh my Lord, 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 Lord. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm." Right? And they have this whole thing sort of going, and it's a circle. And then someone comes up and they start talking about their world and what's going on. As a professional musician years later, when I started playing in these Baptist-style churches, I realized that people were really doing that still. I'd grown up in a Roman Catholic church, and I'm sorry, I'm going to sort of be like a little sacrilegious just to my own experience here, but the music in my church was not very enjoyable, and it was a lot of, "Our Father, who art in heaven," and it was like, why are we singing like this? Like, you know, and yet these churches that I was playing at, they were lively, right? And there was a lot of interaction, and music could just pop up out of anywhere. And people could just talk out of anywhere. And so this is this kind of experience we're talking about, this 21st century version. I wanted to show you a bit of that scene so you can get a sense of, you know, earlier transports from Africa, how some of these practices were still finding their ways, even when being kind of caged by most of white society.
Lord, we stand before you this evening to say thank you. And we thank you, Father, for your grace and your many blessings. Now, I run off and left all my young'uns and my kinfolk in bondage. So I'm standing here this evening, Heavenly Father, to ask your blessings on all of us. Amen. So that if tomorrow is our great getting up moment, if tomorrow we have to meet the judgment day, Heavenly Father, we want you to let our folks know that we died facing the enemy. We want them to know that we went down standing up amongst those that are fighting against our oppression. We want them to know, Heavenly Father, that we died for freedom. We ask these blessings in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh, my Lord, 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 Lord. Oh, my Lord, Lord.
So this would be a communal, you know, church practice that would have been evident in most communities. And the other side of this, where we can get some example of what the kind of call and response. So in this case, the call is being Morgan Freeman, right? And then there's all of these little responses as people feel them. In some cases, it was more direct than that. And some of the hardest songs for me to talk about and to listen to, but I find them profound, and I feel like I honor these people when I do, are work songs. I think we say these names like a work song. Does anyone know what a work song is? And so, some are nodding and some maybe not so much. So a work song was a song that a slave sang during their day of work. And when we think about that, like I remember the first time someone gave me a book of these songs, and I remember like just weeping, just being completely overcome by the idea of it just was, the chapter was just called Work Songs. And it wasn't like, not everyone's work songs, just the people that were enslaved and had to do this work. This was what they sang, and that was the part that moved me more than anything, was just this triumph of that spirit, right? This idea like, we're gonna do it, we're gonna sing these songs, and we're gonna do it by that great sort of African sense of call and response. And so there's one that I like to play. It's called "I'll Be So Happy When the Sun Goes Down." So I'm going to just play you a little bit of that. And I want you to just listen to the call and response of the leader and the group. This one was recorded by a guy named Alan Lomax. So he was a musicologist who was traveling the South in the early part of the 1900s. And so the recording you're hearing is them, right? It's the group. This is them singing it. So always makes it a little bit harder, but also again honors their spirit.
When the sun goes down,
I'll be so glad
when
the sun goes down.
when the sun goes down,
Oh, let's leave it, but
uh-huh, but I wanna lie down,
oh, let's leave it, but
uh-huh, but I wanna lie
I
down,
wanna lie down.
oh yeah,
I wanna lie down.
yeah, I wanna lie down,
Oh, let's leave it, but
uh-huh,
I wanna lie down.
yeah, I wanna lie down.
So part of that is to get oneself through the workday, some activity. As you can imagine, part of that is a metrical, metered thing, right? To keep the work exactly efficient each time. Everyone can sort of move their mannerisms based on that. But there's really no more blues root you can get than those songs. You can hear it in their voices. Those major notes, those higher notes, they're not getting to those. They're getting to the notes right below the minor notes, the blues notes. This is the note. They're singing the one right below that, just a little bit, to give it that sort of that sense and that experience. This is where the blues comes from, right? This is what happens. I wanted to do a quick, calm response because you loved clapping so much. So I think now you want to sing more. I've been teaching 18-year-olds for 20 years. I know you all want to sing with me. But I would like to do this. So I'm gonna call, and I just want you to respond to me, right? So I'm gonna play something, and I just want you to sing it back, okay? Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you for doing that. So this is when we start doing the blues. This back and forth is part of it. So every time I'm playing in a blues-based situation, I'm assuming that the musicians are listening to me, are thinking about me as I'm thinking about them. The idea, as we said earlier, it's not about like where we end up. It's that at every given moment, there's this interaction. There's a participatory part. And if people are onlookers, that's fine, though they really serve no role unless they participate. So an audience says, yeah, yeah, okay, go. You know, like these are like really good clubs that I played at. It's incredible, right? They're becoming part of the band, and we become livened by their spirit for these things. So this communal thing is what we're talking about, this call and response nature, communal, exercising negative feelings. All right, let me move along just so I don't outrun my time here. The last part is just this structure element. The structure of the blues is what's called cyclical. And all that means is once it gets started, it moves through 12 musical measures, and then it just keeps repeating itself. So in many ways, this is why like hip hop is one of the most blues-based genres there is. You get a really good beat, and you play it over and over and over. And over top, you just do different things. You rap, you sing, you do different rhymes, you do whatever, right? You do maybe, and this, my love of trumpet came from late 90s or late 80s, early hip hop music, which was where the only place I couldn't find trumpets in rock music, but I could find it in hip hop songs, right? They were playing them. So, and they would be on a loop, right? Cyclical, right? So this is part of that tradition. And what we look at typically is a certain kind of way of speaking one's mind over this. And so I think about this often when we think of like kind of the American macho man style, which is like, how does an American macho man deal with his emotions? He doesn't, right? He just doesn't. What? So emotions, I'm too strong for that, right? I'm too strong. I don't have those feelings. What we find is when we get in those situations and we don't, when we don't say it, when we don't wail, when we don't cry, when we don't clap, when we don't do that, we then allow the stress to take over, right? We let our amygdala sort of become the driving force. And then we don't let our limbic system know what things are going to go into our long-term memory the right way, because we haven't named them. And so there was a great study done by the UCLA researchers, which has this thing called affect labeling. And basically this idea that if you label your emotions, if you label your experiences, it's like what we talked about, you find an ownership over them. So in blues verse writing, we're trying to name those pains. We're affect labeling. We're taking those experiences, we're putting them down in a certain way so that then they're ours, right? We're not saying like, no, I'm too big to deal with this. We're saying I'm so big, I know I need to deal with this. Right? So this is what I'm going to ask you to do today, and you don't have to write down something really heavy. I'll try and think of one too, just so you don't think I'm getting out of this scot-free. But I'm going to ask you to try and write a blues stanza with me, and you can share it if you want to, but of course most of you are fine to not do that. So let me move the slide.
There's paper and pencils on every table. Help yourself.
So the form of this music is basically it's this 12 measures that goes on and on and on. And let me just, Liz, how am I with time?
We're really should wrap up in about 5.
Okay, all right, interesting, all right. Okay, so what's the Cliff Notes version of this? So what we're talking about is basically 3 statements. In the first statement, you're just saying, what happened? What are we talking about? What's your thing? What is it you'd like to say? How are you feeling, maybe? Right? And this is like just a short, simple statement. In the second statement, we're just repeating it, right? It's this reaffirmation of the thing. We're just saying it again to just be sure that we know what we're talking about. And in the third statement, we're saying, sorry, let me slide out of the way. What do you think? What do you do now? How do you move forward? Not all of these questions, just any of these questions. You know, what do you think about what you're feeling? What do you do now? How do you move forward? And what I'm saying is most blues does these things. I'll go back to that in a second, but here were 3 that I pulled up. This is a song called I Asked for Water. Check this out.
For water.
I know, right? I grew up on B.B. King.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What'd you say?
I grew up on Bobby King and Bobby Blue Bland. My grandparents used to listen to this stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the real stuff, right? Like it's the roots of all that we listen to. Because I'm pressed for time. Yeah, B.B. King. Nobody loves me but my mother. She could be jiving too, which I think is just a great line. And then now you see why I act so funny bad when you do the things you do, right? And so a lot of this, especially the commercial ones, had a little bit of a love sort of turn at the end. Bessie Smith in 1920 starts talking about, I woke up this morning with an awful aching head. My new man had left me just a room and an empty bed, right? So there's of course this rhyme component in that one, but that certainly wasn't always the case, right? So the idea was, however you sang it, you could sort of make it like it had a rhyme to it. I think I was trying to think of an Eagles one on the way over here. Let me think. What? Man, it's a good team. It just wasn't their day. Man, it's a good team. It just wasn't their day. Maybe next season, we'd still love to watch them play. Something, right? Yeah, right. Something, right? Trying to find the positive, right? In a thing like, man, it's a good team. It just wasn't their day, right? So, if we're feeling these things, we say those things. If I were to put that over a piano track, that's how that idea goes. Does anyone want to share one with us? Yeah. Would you mind coming up and saying it? Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right.
And this is for all teachers.
Oh, I like it. I like it already.
And it's definitely the blues. Bunya's hurting, on my feet teaching all day. Thank God for the weekend, almost on the way.
Thank you. Anyone else? Don't let Liz, we have to be out of here. Drive your... All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for your attentiveness. I really appreciate it. And in all truthfulness, I always say it over and over and again. With my music students, what we say, I always try and remind them, like this, we're so lucky. We're so lucky to have this. I hope they have careers. But I'm just so thankful for them that they personally have this thing, because it really is a mental health thing. Whether you play music, or you just try writing these little exercises, or you just listen hard, you dance while you're listening, I think all of these things are things that we sometimes overlook that are important, right? That pull us into that activity. So it certainly has healing potential that we probably just don't even know the extent of. So thank you guys, really appreciate your time.
I got a little trivia for you. I know B.B. King's guitarist